Darren Rovell with Collect TV here with Will Stern, and we are doing our auction recap. Not much going on this week, but we did have video games at Heritage and gives us a little chance to deep dive into video games. Listen, what we try to do here at Collect is to give you comps to show you how things relate to another. And video games is a little bit more difficult. Whether it's a Rev A, whether it has white bullets or orange bullets, whether it is a sealed A plus or a A plus plus or a near mint or a 80, 85 complete in box, whatever it is. It is a little bit confusing, but that does not mean you should stay away from it. Will, before we go, I know you're into video games in general. I was less so now. What would you say is the state of the business before we go review these items?
So I think what we saw in 2021, 2022 were a bunch of massive sales punctuated by $2 million sale of a hang tab Mario, right? And since then, just like everything else, sports cards peaked around then, everything was up. What we've really seen is a lack of new big money coming into the space. And this was, in my mind, a really good test of where we were. And I think what we saw is that we haven't really seen much growth in demand, at least at the high end.
Yeah, again, it's hard. On the Super Mario World, which went for 125,000, that one I think it's like the second highest ever, but if you look at the highest ever, it was in the pandemic and three times as much essentially. When you find a real comp, Contra was kind of a real comp. This was the second best ever offered, goes for 20,000. The first best goes for 150,000 3 years ago. So I think it's interesting. Yeah, Mega Man stood out, right? That's one to report. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, so that's a Dr. Wright misprint, which is basically it was changed to Dr. Wiley, and that's an indicator that it was the first production. Only 4 sealed copies of that misprint first production have actually been graded by WADA. And the last time a comparable one sold, it was 75K in 2019. So this is up from that. It's over 100,000. So I think the two most meaningful sales from this auction were the Castlevania and the Super Smash Brothers. And I think both of them, one is a kind of a positive indicator and one's a pretty poor one. So with the Castlevania, it's the first time a sealed and graded hang tab copy, which is essentially an early or first production copy, has appeared at market. And it sold for, over
100 grand,
exactly,
right?
yeah, exactly 100 grand. So what's interesting about that is we just saw a few months ago an ungraded hang tab copy sell
On
for,
eBay, right? For
yeah,
90? Yeah.
90 grand, the most ever for a game on eBay. And that was since graded higher than this one. So I think that's actually a quite positive indicator, right? That someone was willing to pay more than was just
All right.
paid.
What about the Smash Bros?
Now for the Smash Bros, that sold for 240K in August 2022, and it only got less. It got 93.75. So that's a pretty steep fall, and it's the single highest graded of I'd say one of the most iconic games and most popular games of the 90s. And that's, I think, where it's best to look and say, okay, the high end money's not coming in, at least at the levels that we'd seen previously.
I had someone who has been in video games all along, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Wait and see." And after he said, "Wait and see." So I don't think there was any kind of conclusion here on the market as to what happened. I think that when you do find comps and there are such huge deltas here, it doesn't make people that comfortable. I feel the same way in type one, where it's like it seems like something might be similar, and obviously comps are totally different, but seems like this is a better photo, seems like this is something, and then it's like, wait a second, what I thought was going to be in the range of something wasn't even in the ballpark. That does not provide comfort to someone who is in the market or who's already in the market. So I think we're still in a wait and see mode, and let's see if video games gets galvanized at all by anything coming down. I do think there is, and I just want you to weigh in finally here. There's nothing like a found video game story, right? Like the Castlevania that came out on eBay, like those things just skyrocket. And I think one thing video games does have is the ability to have viral stories when something is found.
Yeah, I mean, we reported on it's the Dallas Fort Worth find, and it was pedigreed by CGC, and it's just got this great story behind it. And I think, people have shown in video games, there's the Carolina collection, the Plattsville collection, and people like those pedigrees because it's like, holy cow, why did somebody keep something like this sealed for 20 years? It makes no sense. And that really does add fuel to that fire. And that pedigree, at least a large chunk of it, will be auctioned, I believe, at Heritage this summer. So that's also going to be an interesting indicator.
And despite that, people like me say, "Oh God, I don't like that. I don't like the pedigree thing. I don't like big fines. I still think there's a box of them somewhere." We really haven't had the big fear in the video game market, which is that a ton of something came up. Normally, when you have these fines, they're a little bit of everything. And it's not like, oh, they just found 800 sealed stadium games somewhere. All right, well, that's our auction recap. We stuck to video games, but we got a bigger auction recap next Monday because there's a lot more things to go. I hope that some of you who are either are or aren't into video games kind of enjoyed the recap. And each time we try to give you a little something for everyone. It is still a market where it is very much a nascent market, and there's a lot to watch. So for Will Stern, I'm Darren Rovell. Thanks for watching Collect TV.